Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and this is Chasing Legends. Alexa, hit my music.
Your liked songs from Spotify.
Please subscribe, always subscribe. So if nothing else, we kind of pick up those subscribers and stuff, help keep things alive. Go down to our About section, you'll see that we have shirts for Dutch Hunter Rendezvous and the Legend of Superstition Mountains. The black, the gray, long sleeve, short sleeve. We don't make a dime, but it looks cool. And they're good, high quality shirts. The last few weeks, we kind of covered the Peralta stones, Tumlinson stones, whatever we want to do them. I want to take a little bit of a breather for two reasons. Reason one is give everybody a little break from it, because it'll be kind of a very similar story pattern line, and you get two or three more of those kind of videos with the Bilberry crosses and the Latin Heart. It would just kind of seem old and redundant to some degree. Number two is I'm trying to work myself through about 8-10 hours of interviews that Michael Bilberry did. So I'm trying to get through all that interview stuff and make some notes. Go back and listen to the stuff and kind of get everything shored up. I feel pretty confident. I'm 97-98% on what we're documenting and what we're doing here. So, and there's a little opinion speculation gets tossed in there, which I try to refrain from doing. But I think we're being pretty much on point with everything. And I want to do a really good job by these, because I want them to be something that stands alone. We don't have to revisit them. They'll be there. We can always reference to those. Moving forward, though, in today, last week we've gotten quite a bit of rain, so quite unusual for midsummer here. We're in that heat area where we're pretty much running 110, 115, and lo and behold, this year we got some rainfall, and we got it Monday, Wednesday, Friday at work, and then Saturday and today, because we generally film these on Sundays. It rained pretty much all the way through. I think we picked up about a ½ inch, 3/4 of an inch yesterday, and 1.5 inches today. So it's a nice sustained rainfall. It's very different. It's been in the 70s. It's been like a nice breather and a break. We'll move back into the hundreds this week. So it's not it was a nice respite from everything we're doing, but that's very cool that the water's kind of getting into the aquifer, and we got a good soaking. And that was more important than just getting a ton of rain, is having the sustained periodic rainfalls where it's working its way in. One of those fun facts for people, I live in the city of Surprise in Arizona, and basically the amount of water usage a average golf course uses per capita of the people that live in it is literally, the 4 golf courses, or 5 I believe, here in Surprise, Arizona. They literally outuse I think it was like 4 or 5 times the amount of water that the population uses in its entirety during an annual year. So just when people are saying, well, there's such a shortage of water, it's generally more on the commercial side. Most of the water is all used. That's a shame, because when they're telling us we have to conserve or this or that, number one, water just evaporates, goes in the aquifer, whatever it does. It's more of usage and population concerning water. We're not running out of water. We always will have water. But it's just the usage, and it just goes to show you that when they're telling us to cut back, there is no conservation going on those other ends with the cities and the commercial usage. And the private citizens can't even impact anything like that. If we cut ours in half, it's still 4 or 5 times the usage. It's going to be 7-8 times the usage. So, fun fact, right? Always makes you feel warm and fuzzy and good. But anyways, loved the thunder and lightning this week and the rainfall, which had me thinking, because I spent a lot of time just standing in the garage staring out at the rain, enjoying the cool weather, which was nice. And I was thinking back, this had to happen. I'm thinking it was 77, 78. I don't think it was 76. I think it was a bit after the bicentennial. And we went back in the Superstitions, and we're up in Labarge area. And it was January, February, and it generally rains during that time period. And we got in, and it looked like rain, and it was doing a drizzle, a sprinkle and a drizzle off and on. And we got back in there. I was still a young buck back then. And I still have my same pack from then. Sometime I'll have to do some of that. I still have my first 2 packs, I believe. My original 2 packs that I had as a kid. I still have them. And the pack I would have had at this time was my green Kilimanjaro pack, which I still own and have. Anyhow, we hucked everything in there. To kind of start the description of all this, is that I've talked about it before, is back then, during that time period, everybody used those old canvas tents. I don't know. Some people are going to throw back and kind of smile and then wince because they were these canvas, heavy tents. They had a couple big, thick poles in them, and there were some lines off of them, and you had some stakes. And canvas tents, the problem is they're actually very heavy. They're very durable, but one of the big problems associated with them is that when it rained, even if they're waterproof, if you touched the walls or anything moved against the walls, eventually the water started to come through. And the tents always seemed to allow the moisture to come in, and they didn't ventilate really well. There was no ventilation whatsoever outside your front fly. And there wasn't really a fly. It was just you zipped it shut and you were closed in. I don't think there was any venting at all in those old tents. And it was like being in a pile of dirty sweat socks. So literally it stunk. If someone passed gas in one of those old tents, especially when it rained, that's what it smelled like, rotten eggs the rest of the night. So they weren't very comfortable. Usually went in, and in this instance, I think there was 4 or 5 tents. There was about 8, 10 people. You would try to, if you're bringing the tents in, is one guy would hump the tent in with the poles, and then the other guy would hump it out. So, and if you were going uphill in and downhill out, you think you'd want the downhill, but if it looked like rainy weather, I would rather hike the tent in than carry that thing that weighed probably twice its dead weight on the way out, because the canvas was not going to dry. You had to basically get it home, and then you had to get them out and then open them all up and then let them breathe for a couple days. And even then, they still kind of kept that smell. Good old canvas tents. Anyhow, that's what we had. Remember, we showed up, and what we had to do was, because of the drizzle, we were getting the tent out to set it up, and we threw our ponchos, took off, shirt, whatever we could, threw it on the pack and stuff, whatever we could keep dry, and put the ponchos on the packs. And then what we were doing was setting up the tent. Once we had this tent set up, then we tried to get our gear as dry as we could inside the tents and get our gear dry. And then we basically decided, I remember what we did was we put a poncho out in front of ours and kind of propped it up, found a couple sticks. And that gave us a patio. Now, it was muddy and all, but it kind of kept the rain, and we could open the front of it up. And it was getting later in the day, and of course it's drizzling and stuff. There wasn't any cover that I could remember, so we basically just had to stick to our tents. And there wasn't a lot of room in those tents. It was, literally that was it. Once your packs, your sleeping bags, 2 people were in there, that was it. There was not much. There wasn't an inch to move. So we're getting in there. Remember, we had the tent set up. I was with a gentleman. I don't always like to use the last names, but his first name was Scott. We got the tent set up, and I remember we had it set. And it was like a plateau, so it was like kind of a, and it wasn't steps necessarily, but it kind of like would rise. And we got the kind of the bit of higher ground. It was cleared, so we figured we got up on this space and we pitched our tent. And I remember we got ready to sit down. We had our sterno, so we got our sterno out, heated up our water, mixed our food, kind of towards the entrance. We're able to do that and then do everything. So that was kind of. Like I said, it was just kind of one of those trips. We knew we were making the trip, and then nothing would ever get accomplished on that. That was more almost just literally a camping trip for a couple nights. I do remember the second night, it didn't rain as much, but that first night, it just rained through the whole night. And it was just miserable because by morning, the rain finally did break, and we had to hang all the sleeping bags, everything out, because everything got damp. And it was literally from the saturation of the moisture, and then where it touched the tent in spots, moisture would seep through. Pretty miserable. You get up, and you end up just kind of going outside and trying to air out. Of course, the other difficulty in all this is your boots, your shoes, everything is soaked. And there's no way to dry it out. You put on dry socks, guess what? They're just wet within 5-10 minutes. And those don't dry out. Now, at that time, I'm still wearing Converse All-Stars, so I was still wearing high tops. I hated wearing boots. The one definite advantage I had over a lot of people at that point is they would dry out. So I could go for an hour or two and they would dry out for the most part, and I could wear a double pair of socks and generally my feet would stay dry. One of the things that really sucks is if you get in the mountains for a couple days and it's always wet and your shoes are just soaked and you can't get everything dry. The thing, especially the soles, inside soles of the shoes, because the water moisture keeps coming out, is by the time you get done with that trip, you need a day or two for your feet literally to air out and dry out. Those old high tops, that was one advantage I always had, is you could literally dry your feet out pretty quick. Shoes would dry out a lot quicker and your feet dried out a lot faster. They ventilated much better, especially those old Converse. So people always kind of laugh and say this and that, but you know, never a sprained ankle. So literally it worked for me. I'm not going to say it's going to work for you, but it's worked for me my whole time and experience in the mountains. So we finished up, we get in, it rains through the night, which wakes you up constantly. If it's not for you, the other person in the tent's snoring or rolling over and you're trying to roll the other way because you don't want to be face to face, and everything else, and just the misery of the humidity, and you're just hoping you don't have to go to the bathroom during the night because you got to go out and put on those wet shoes and walk through the whatever, and then go to the bathroom and then come back. It's just miserable. So I'll never forget, we get up the next morning and I woke up and I start to open the tent because I had to go to the bathroom. So I'm opening the tent and I get the tent open, I put on my shoes, I look out and I'm like, where the hell am I? So I'm looking around and I looked out and then I kind of looked to the sides where there should have been another tent and there was nobody there. And I was looking around and it was just totally puzzling to me. It's like, okay, is this like someone played a joke? And somehow, how did they manage to pick us up in the rain and move us at all? Well, I got up and I got out and I look out and the guys are about 25, 30 feet over behind our tent. And I'm just looking at it like, and everybody's looking at us, you know, and it's kind of like with a puzzled look. Like, well, you could see on the ground where I guess we'd been enough on a slope and with movement, the tent had actually, I guess maybe hydrofoiled, but it moved slowly down the hill as we slept. And the wind was blowing and we're moving around and the tent would just kind of inch its way down. So somehow in the night, about 20, 30 feet, we worked our way down the hill. I guess the tent stakes weren't put in. It was pretty rocky soil. So, and Scott got up and the same thing. He's just looking at it and you know, you're doing that look around and kind of like one of the funniest things, you know, I guess if you were by yourself, you would have been totally kind of blown away, but you could literally see like a snail trail of where our tent just worked its way, not a straight line, but kind of worked its way down and kind of finally found its resting place. Needless to say, we were only staying there that night, and then that day I think it rained a lot less, and then the next night we were kind of working our way back out, and we had a brief camp, and we always tried to take the long way in, and then coming out, do the second camp kind of coming out closer, so you didn't have as much, you know, by the time you're worn out and just beat. And that was one of those trips where we were pretty miserable. It was damp. You enjoyed your time in the mountains and stuff, but I don't think we got to do as much as we hoped. Of course, you know, you can't, rainfall in the mountains is always good for the mountains, so it didn't really matter. And I remember Scott had to haul the tent out because I'd actually realized we were in rainy season, late January, early February, during that time period. So he had to haul it out, and I do remember it took about a week to air that tent out. I mean, that tent just smelled awful, just like old wet canvas, damp, nasty, musty. And basically, once we got home, I just popped it up, and we had two of them at the house, and I popped them up and just let them air and get as much sunshine as possible until the next trip. And within a couple years, we started getting the nylon tents, which actually, they didn't hold the heat. During cold weather, those old canvas tents would hold heat really good, but once we got to those nylon tents, they repelled water better. They had the rain flies, which helped a lot. They ventilated a lot better, and they didn't seem to have the leakage, and they had those plastic floors, which were much, much better, which was another problem with a lot of the canvas tents. The ones we had canvas bottoms. In fact, the first 4 or 5 man tent I had was one of those Coleman, what are they, kind of teal green and yellow tents. And that was a canvas tent too, a monster tent to set up. Easy, once it's set up, and you know, a hurricane could blow through and that tent wasn't going anywhere. But again, it always had that canvas tent smell. And it would hold the rain out, but it was always humid inside. It didn't ventilate, so it literally was just, especially the next morning, the sun comes up and hits that thing. It's like a sauna. So, but yeah, sometime 77, 78, back in the Superstitions, back in Labarge. Cool story. Wanted to share a story, lighten things up. We got the rainy season upon us. And then we'll get kind of back into some history stuff and kind of move it around. If you're just joining us, or this is the first time you catch it, Chasing Legends, definitely, you know, we kind of move around like this a bit, a little bit of personal anecdotes and stories, some history. We'll talk about some historical figures and different things and cover some books and different things. But we want to cover different subject matter and keep it moving around. Just so kind of get everybody experienced. Another thing we're looking to do, and I know a lot of people love this idea, is we're talking about sometime this fall before the end of the year to put together a website where the YouTube, the Facebook, everything connects. And we could put up a lot of other things up onto this website. It would be a great thing. We have old archival footage going back up into the 50s and 60s. There's these audio interviews that I refer to and stuff, and it'd be so great to be able to put those audio clips, if not, and sometimes maybe entire interviews piece by piece, and allow people to share that. I don't see a reason to hide that stuff. The reason people did them was for them to be shared, and sitting on shelves or in cabinets somewhere, they're not doing anybody any good. But it's much better to have them out there. The quality on them are dodgy, but I'm trying to digitally transfer and clean that stuff up. So it's a nice archival project to work on, and a website would be a great way to take that kind of material, especially material I've received from Dutch hunters that watch our programs, Legend of Superstition Mountains and Chasing Legends, that have sent tapes and stuff in back from the 70s and 80s and the 90s, and some of their stories they've told, and with their permission, it would be great to be able to put those in as well, so other people can have their voices in. So it'd be a great project to do. I hope that's coming. Always kick in there in the comments about the support for such a thing. It's not going to be like a forum or anything like that. It would be an archive of material for people to share concerning subject matter. Not opinion, speculation, but history. So very cool. I hope everybody else is staying dry and above water everywhere else, but you're having some sweet weather like we are. And until the next time, next week, I'm Wayne Tuttle, you're not, and this is Chasing Legends.